You know, some names become so infamous, they literally become the definition of the crime itself. Today, we're talking about one of those names, Charles Ponzi. His story isn't just about some con man. It's about how one incredibly charismatic fraud convinced the world he was a genius and built an entire empire on, well, nothing but lies. Let's dig into how he did it.
Okay, picture this. It's Boston, 1920. Thousands of people are jammed into the streets outside a single office, and they are desperate, literally begging to hand over their life savings to one man. They truly believed he had found the secret to making them all rich. But the whole thing was a complete illusion. So the question is, how on earth did one man pull this off?
To really understand the scam, we first have to understand the myth. See, before the whole thing collapsed, Charles Ponzi wasn't seen as a criminal. Far from it. He was celebrated as some kind of financial wizard. And a huge part of his credibility came from the media. The Boston Post, a major newspaper at the time, was calling him a financial genius. I mean, that's a massive stamp of approval, right? Every headline that praised him was like a magnet, pulling in thousands of new, unsuspecting investors who thought they were getting in on a sure thing.
But this genius didn't just appear out of thin air. To really get who Charles Ponzi was, we have to rewind the clock and take a look at the man before the scheme.
Ponzi's whole mindset seems to have been locked in pretty early on. His family had once been wealthy, and he was just bitter about losing that status. He craved luxury, and he was absolutely repulsed by the very idea of honest, hard 9-to-5 work. So when he showed up in America, his goal wasn't to build a life, it was to get rich, fast, and he didn't really care how.
And let me tell you, his first decade or so in America was anything but glamorous. It was just a string of dead-end jobs he'd either quit or get fired from for, cheating customers. This was followed by his real apprenticeship, crime. He served time not once, but twice. First for check forgery, then for smuggling undocumented immigrants. This wasn't a sudden turn to crime for him, it was a long-established pattern.
And it turns out he had a pretty good teacher. Before his own scheme, he worked at a bank in Montreal for a guy named Zerosi. And Zerosi was running a smaller version of the very same scam, using money from new depositors to pay fake high-interest returns to the earlier ones. Ponzi watched, he learned, and he saw firsthand just how effective this whole robbing Peter to pay Paul thing could be.
But here's the thing. Every great scam needs a great story. And Ponzi's story, the one that made him millions, started with a simple piece of mail.
So after a bunch of failed businesses, Ponzi is back in his small Boston office when he gets a letter from a company in Spain. Tucked inside to cover the return postage was something called an international reply coupon, or IRC. Now, for most people, this was just junk mail. For Ponzi, it was a bolt of lightning.
Ponzi knew about a perfectly legitimate investment strategy called arbitrage. It's actually pretty simple. If you can buy something cheap in one market, let's say Italy, and then sell it for more in another market, like the US, you can pocket the difference. It's a real tactic people have used for centuries.
And that's where these little IRCs came in. See, an IRC bought in any country could be exchanged for a fixed value of postage stamps in any other country in the Union. The trick was, because of all the currency chaos after World War I, the price you paid for the coupon was different everywhere, but its redemption value in stamps was always the same.
So this was the genius plan he pitched to everyone. And you have to admit, it sounded brilliant, and more importantly, it sounded totally legal. The idea was to send agents to countries like Italy, where the currency was weak, buy up mountains of cheap IRCs, ship them to the US, swap them for more valuable postage stamps, sell the stamps, and then just rake in the profit.
It was a fantastic story. It sounded complex enough to be real, but simple enough for anyone to get the basic idea. It seemed absolutely foolproof. So, what was the problem?
Well, the catch was that the whole thing was a mathematical impossibility. The profit on each individual coupon was tiny, and once you factored in shipping and all the logistics, it basically disappeared. To support the crazy returns he was promising, calculations showed he would have needed about 160 million IRCs. The problem? There were only about 27,000 in circulation in the entire world. The legit business was never, ever going to work.
And this is the exact moment Ponzi pivoted. When he realized the IRC plan itself was a total failure, he didn't scrap it. Oh no, he just started selling the story instead of the actual investment.
And this right here is where the classic Ponzi scheme was truly born. He wasn't investing anyone's money in IRCs, not a single dollar.
He was just taking new investors' cash and using a piece of it to pay off the earlier investors. Those early guys would then rave about their incredible returns, creating this feedback loop of excitement and greed that just brought in more and more people.
And what a return it was. He was promising an unbelievable 50% profit in just 45 days. No bank, no legitimate investment could ever come close to that. It was a promise designed to completely bypass your brain and go straight for your emotions. He was targeting ordinary people, people with more dreams than common sense, who were desperate to get rich quick.
And it worked beyond his wildest dreams. The word spread like wildfire. At its absolute peak, his company was taking in $250,000 a day. And remember, that's in 1920 money. He was finally living that lavish life he always felt he deserved.
And the public just ate it up. The same paper that would later destroy him was, for a time, his biggest fan. This quote just shows you how completely he had fooled everyone. He wasn't a con man, he was a hero, a genius, an immigrant success story. But behind closed doors, it was a very different story. Ponzi made a huge mistake. He hired an honest publicist, a guy named William McMasters. McMasters got a look at the books, or, the lack of books, and he figured out the truth almost immediately. He saw a man smoking fancy cigars and talking complete nonsense, not some financial mastermind. The emperor had no clothes.
What McMaster's holding the evidence, that whole house of cards was about to come tumbling down, and one man's name was about to become synonymous with fraud forever. So, the Boston Post, prompted by a financial analyst named Clarence Barron, started digging. Barron did the math we just saw, proving the IRC scheme was impossible. But the final nail in the coffin? That was McMaster's. He went straight to the paper with all of Ponzi's secrets, writing a Pulitzer Prize-winning exposé that just blew the lid off the entire operation. The game was up.
And his downfall was just as swift as his rise was spectacular. He was indicted on 86 counts of mail fraud. He only served a few years, but he clearly didn't learn his lesson. He immediately started a new land scam down in Florida, got caught again, and served even more time. Eventually, he was deported back to Italy. His wife divorced him, and the man who once had millions died completely broke and alone in a charity hospital.
Ponzi wasn't the first person to run this kind of scam, but he did it on such an epic, public scale that his name is now attached to it forever. His story is just this powerful reminder of the dangers of greed and the powerful allure of something that sounds too good to be true. And it leaves us with a really critical question. Over a century has passed, and sure, the technology has changed, but human psychology really hasn't. So why are we still so susceptible to that same old promise of getting rich quick?